Olá, pessoal. Aqui é o Robert Swerling, sou piloto de linha aérea, jornalista especializado em aviação, e hoje estamos indo para o 10º episódio do nosso novo canal, que é o ASA de Aviation, Space e ATC. Agradeço as mensagens de apoio que vocês têm enviado, muitas sugestões. Nós estamos evoluindo bastante, ainda temos muito a evoluir. Nós sabemos que o trabalho é longo e volto a frisar que teremos ainda as matérias, não só as entrevistas, mas as matérias feitas em aeroportos, áreas de treinamento, manutenção, então há muito trabalho ainda pela frente. E hoje, como é o 10º episódio, eu tenho um convidado especial, só que a gente vai ter que conversar em inglês agora. So, let's talk in English. Hey, everybody in the United States. Here is Robert Swerling, aviation journalist and airline pilot. And today we have a great guest. The captain of our show today is the commander, the leader of the APG team. Let's say a hello to Captain Jeff Nielsen. Hello, Captain Jeff.
Hello, Robert. How are you? Great
I'm
to be
fine,
here.
and you? Oh, it's an
Oh,
honor to have you here in our the channel, the Aviation, Space, and ATC channel. Honor, and I'm a big fan. And welcome aboard.
well, thank you
How
very much.
and how was your flight today?
Well, today is one of those days where the trip that you bid for and is on paper supposed to operate a certain way, and then all of a sudden you get a message when you're flying en route, and it says instead of going to Birmingham, which is a very short flight, we'd already gone up to I start in Atlanta. I'm based in Atlanta. We were supposed to go from Atlanta to Pittsburgh, back to Atlanta, and then over to Birmingham, Alabama, which is a very short flight. We would have been in at 1 o'clock local time, and it would have had a nice layover. And instead, our ACARS device told us that we were going to do something different. So when we get to Atlanta, you're now going to fly to Detroit, and then after that, you're going to fly to Philadelphia. So two, longer legs, and one more leg than I was anticipating today, and a shorter layover. But that's okay. I was most afraid that that was going to affect our meeting for this interview, and it turns out that it worked out. It was just a much longer day, but sometimes you get a good deal, sometimes not so great a deal. But tomorrow, hopefully, I'll be back on track, pick up the balance of my trip. So, but that's the way it is, and you know that in this industry, you may
Yeah.
not do what you think you're going to do.
Okay. Well, I'm broadcasting live from Studio 1B. Your studio is 1A. 1B at home and the small town of Tupandi, a strange name. It's just 4,400 people living here. And it's in south of Brazil. Good city to live. So let's start our interview. Well, when did you start to think, well, I want to be a pilot?
At a very young age. When we're all kids, we want to do something like be a fireman or a policeman or something like that, and or a pilot or an astronaut or something. And I always enjoyed watching airplanes. When I'd see them fly in the sky. I grew up in Southern California. A lot of aviation traffic there. In fact, my town that I grew up in, Los Alamitos, California, was right next to the Los Alamitos Naval Air Station. So there was a lot of military traffic going in and out of that. And every year they'd have an air show with the Blue Angels demonstration team. And I just fell in love with aviation, watched everything I could on TV about flying. And I was in my backyard with my little airplane, just pretending that I was the pilot of this airplane flying along. And then when my family would take relatives or friends to the Los Angeles International Airport or pick people up, I just love that smell of the burnt jet fuel. And you know what I mean? You're smiling. I see you. And seeing all these big airplanes, and then seeing the pilots and the cabin crew walking through with their nice, smart-looking uniforms and their suitcases, and I'm just imagining all the places that they're traveling around the world. And it was just, I just thought, I have to do this for a living. I want to fly airplanes. That's what I want to do. So I was
So
very lucky. Yeah.
you started with the United States Air Force, yeah?
Yeah, I after I graduated from college, I 2 weeks after I graduated, in fact, I was being sworn in as a officer candidate, uh, officer trainee pilot candidate, and flown down to San Antonio, Texas, where I first went through a program they called the flight screening program because I did not have a private pilot's license at the time. I had a few hours of flying. And, don't get me wrong, it wasn't like I just decided at the last minute, oh, I'm going to be a pilot, and then, just start going through the whole process. I had worked at fixed base operations, FBOs. I don't know if this translates to the same thing in Brazil, but worked at, where you have a lot of general aviation and corporate aviation. I worked my family had moved to Mobile, Alabama at the time. I was working at the Mobile Air Center. We had a contract with a couple of airlines that were going through Mobile to fuel the airplane. So I got checked out on single point refueling and drive the fuel truck there and put my ladder up there and do the single point receptacle and, refuel DC-9s and 727s. And I was just, saturated with the aviation field. It's just that I didn't have a lot of hours logged at that point. But I knew that the Air Force was going to do a great job of training me as long as I could meet all the, the obstacles to get to that point. And so I'm in San Antonio, the flight screening program. Every day they bust us out to a airport out in the middle of nowhere called Hondo, Texas, where they had like a little undergraduate pilot training program set up in, I think it was called the T-41 Muscalero, which was basically a Cessna 172. And I think I ended up logging maybe 13 hours soloing and that kind of thing. And basically they try to simulate the environment that you're going to be under when you go to undergraduate pilot training, just to make sure that you have what it takes to endure that kind of stress. And so I passed through that, and then after I continued with my officer training, and that was a 3-month program. They call it 90-day wonder because it's basically a 3-month program. And after that, you are commissioned a second lieutenant in the United States Air Force. And then after that, then I was sent to Columbus Air Force Base for my pilot training. About a month after I was commissioned, I was starting my UPT, undergraduate pilot training. And yeah, that's how I got my flight training, and was assigned the C-141 Starlifter, C-141B, based in Travis Air Force Base in Northern California. And went to Altus, Oklahoma to learn, how to fly the C-141 and learn all the systems and all that kind of stuff. And then I was out in California for a couple of years, and then I was informed that I would be coming back to the Air Training Command to be an instructor pilot. And so the last 4 years of my time as a pilot in the Air Force, I was an instructor pilot in the T-37 at Columbus Air Force Base in Mississippi.
Great. I think you said sometime that when broadcasting the APG that you had to execute some missions for refueling in there. Is that right?
Yes.
That refueling, yeah.
The C-141B has a refueling capability. The C-141A, the original Starlifter, did not have aerial refueling capability, and it was a shorter airplane, so they stretched the airplane like 23 feet, something like that, put a couple extra sections in, and at the same time they put a air refueling receptacle on the front of above the cockpit and maybe slightly behind, and that's where the aerial refueling boom would stick into the airplane. And I don't know do you have any experience in the military, Robert?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay. Well, I was going to ask if you've ever had the experience of being in an airplane that is actually touching another airplane in flight and actually, transferring fuel from that airplane to your airplane. And it is the most It just like, this is not right. The airplane should not be touching each other. It makes a horrible scraping sound when it's going into the receptacle. It almost sounds like the metal is being peeled off the top of your fuselage. It's just and it's a very challenging thing. Actually, the position before you get into the aerial refueling position is the most challenging, because then you're more affected by the wake of the refueling airplane. Once you get tucked in, the actual refueling position, not the pre-contact, but the actual refueling position, it's much more stable. And yeah, just have to have
a great challenge for a pilot. Yeah.
Yeah. It is.
And when did you start with Acme Airline?
When I finished my tour of duty as an instructor pilot in 1988, December of 1988, I was hired by Acme Airlines, I call it. It's a very large U.S. legacy carrier headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia. And that's where I am based. And I fly, we like to call it the Mad Dog, but we fly the MD-80 series and the MD-90. And the series that we fly, the MD-80, is called the MD-88. So, just Google any of that stuff and you can figure out who I fly for. But the reason why, he's joking, because I don't say that I don't mention the real name of my airline, because I've never received permission I've never asked permission from anybody to do this kind of social media and podcasting kind of thing. And I don't want anybody to think that I'm an official representative for my real airline, just in case I say something that might not be quite right or reflect properly on my airline, although I don't think I ever would. And I've always said very, positive things about my company, because I love the airline that I fly for. I think it's a great airline, great people that work for the company. The pilots are awesome, very highly skilled, very professional people. And, so I'd never say anything bad about it. But again, I never asked for permission to do this. And honestly, when I started the whole thing, I never really thought that it was going to go anywhere and that anybody would actually listen to me. Now the show that we do weekly is right at about 3 hours every week. And my wife, occasionally she'll look at me and she goes, so let me get this straight. You talk about aviation for 3 hours every week and people actually listen to it. I said, yes.
It's great. It's great. Oh, here. The Acme team here.
Yeah. And you know what she does? She just rolls her eyes. She goes, whatever. Okay. It's like, okay. So,
great.
Yeah.
And, the Mad Dog is a great aircraft, but you miss the 727, yeah?
Oh, yeah, I do. Honestly, I never intended to fly the Mad Dog, the MD-88 or the MD-90. And my career progression was, you start out at this major legacy carrier at the time, back in the late 80s, as a 727 flight engineer, or we called it second officer. And at my company, Acme, all of the people that were working that position at that time were pilots, and that was just the entry position. And you do that until you have the seniority to move up or to either a different airplane or a different position. And I had the early opportunity about the year point to move from flight engineer on the 727 to the right seat of the DC-9. But I knew at that time, it was kind of very similar to this time frame that we're in, with a lot of hiring, a lot of movement, at least at the companies here in the United States, where you knew that you weren't going to be stuck in a position for very long and that you'd had the opportunity to move up. And because of that, instead of going to the DC-9, learning a new airplane, I thought, I really like the 727. I already know all the systems on the airplane. I'd like to fly this airplane, because I'd heard so many people say what a great airplane it is to fly. So I just held off for another 6 months, and then I was awarded the first officer position on the 727. And there I sat for 7 years, because I was having a blast. I don't know if you've ever had the opportunity to fly or crew an airplane that had 3 pilots or 2 pilots and a flight engineer, but it is as close to being retired as you can get because the 727 or the L10, I actually flew the L1011 after my 7 years as co-pilot in the 727. Same kind of situation. It's a captain, first officer, or pilot, co-pilot, and flight engineer. And the co-pilot or flight or first officer on a 3-crew pilot crew airplane is so easy because you either fly the airplane on your one segment or you talk on the radio for the other segment when the captain's flying, and that's it.
So you
You
just fly. It's
you just
it's
fly or
great.
talk on the radio. You don't do
Yeah,
any.
great.
You don't run checklists, really. I think, or maybe there may have been some that I may have asked challenges on, like the pre-flight check, but that's about it. Never did a walk around. Didn't have to because the flight
Wow.
engineer does that. He's the one, or she's the one, that's doing all the fuel management and electrical management and all the systems of the airplane. That's what they are doing. And the captain, of course, is doing the same thing as the first officer is doing, except that he has all the responsibility of making the final decisions and, being the captain. And but the first officer is like, yeah, you're just along for the ride, basically. Yeah, it's a great thing. And I did that for 10 years of my almost 30 years now with Acme Airlines. And as I mentioned, the opportunity made itself available to move to the L1011, the TriStar, the Lockheed L1011. And I did that for 3 years as first officer as well. And it was just I couldn't imagine that it would be any better than being a 727 co-pilot. But then after I was on it for about a month or so, I realized that it's a great airplane, maybe even better than the 727. And I was paid more, and the trips were better because they were longer flights, doing coast to coast kind of stuff, and even Hawaii in my last year. So, it was awesome. And so that's what I did for 10 of my first 11 and a half, almost 12 years. And then I finally decided, it's probably about time for me to check out as a captain, a commander. And I thought, I want to fly something that I've flown before. And I'm thinking, well, I'm not going to be able to do that on the TriStar because that at the time was like the big airplane at our company. And that's all the guys, close to retirement are captains on that. So there's no way that I have the seniority to fly that airplane. So I thought, perhaps I can bid to the 727, check out as captain. I've flown that airplane. I mean, I have so many hours in it. It will just be like, putting a glove on. And except that instead of putting the right hand glove on, I put the left hand glove on. It's because you have to do, as going from first officer to captain or whatever. It's not really that difficult. You'd think it would be hard, but it's not. You get the hang of it very, very quickly. And so I was able to, and at the time that 727 was in the midst of a retirement program. They were retiring the fleet. So I knew that my time on it as a captain would be limited, and then I'd eventually have to move off of it onto something else. So my plan was never to fly the Mad Dog, but when I did get displaced or knocked off the 727 because they had to decrease the staffing on it because they were getting rid of the airplane, the only thing I could fly captain on in Atlanta was the Mad Dog. So I thought, I've heard so many horrible things about it, but I'll just, grin and bear it for as long as I need to, and then I can bid for the 737 or something else, and so I started flying it, and I kept waiting for it to really be bad, and it never, it's not a 727, it's not an L1011, but it's an airliner. It's a pretty, actually, not a bad piece of machine. And then I also started getting some seniority as well. And I went, oh, that's what all these men and women have been talking about for all this time that I never quite could grasp because I never experienced seniority. I heard other people talking about it, but I never had it. I never understood what it meant. And then I thought, wait a minute, I have seniority now. I don't have to fly on the weekends if I don't want to. I can be home for all the holidays. I can be home for my children's birthdays. Wow, this is a whole new world for me. Maybe I'll stick on this airplane for a little bit longer. And here I am, 16 years later on the Mad Dog. And my position on it is about number 20 out of, I think, 700 captains in Atlanta. And So I have super seniority on it, and my bidding is easy because I just go through and I have all these parameters, and it kind of gives me a list of trips that meet my parameters, and I just go, well, this week I think I'll fly this one. This week I'll fly this one, and I almost always get my first choice of trips. So it's very nice.
So you don't want to go to the international flights, just stay flying the Mad Dog.
Yeah, well, well, you're a young man, and I'm not. And for the little bit of time that I was flying the TriStar as a co-pilot, doing the international, I'm using air quotes, because international, I mean, we were flying to Hawaii. So, I mean, it was the United States. It's not really international, but according to our contract, it was considered international. It was long haul. And I was like 39, 40 years old. I'd get over to Honolulu and I'd just be walking around in a fog. And I'm thinking, wow, this is wiping me out as a relatively young man. I know a lot of you young people out there watching, listening are thinking 39, 40, that's not a young man. But, you know, compared to where I am now, I'll be 60 in December. I was considered, I'd say a younger man. And I knew how it was affecting me at the time. And I'm thinking, I can't imagine doing this in my 50s because, you know, I'm not feeling great about this long haul stuff now. And so basically, I did a little bit of long haul as a first officer. I also did long haul when I was flying the C-141 in the Air Force. I got to travel all around the world. So I kind of got that out of my system. And I kind of like just flying trips that I'm staying either in the same time zone as my home time zone, or maybe 2 hours time difference, but that's not a big deal at all. So yeah, I guess you could say that I'm kind of enjoying doing the short to medium haul stuff, and it doesn't affect my pay, except that I could be flying a much larger airplane and having a higher hourly rate. That's the way our system works at my company. But having the seniority that I have on the smaller airplane allows me to pick up extra flying to kind of make up for the fact that I'm not making as much money as I could possibly be making on a bigger airplane. So bottom line, yeah, I'm probably not going to be a long haul guy. The next category that I go to, because right now the Mad Dog fleet is being retired, and I'm not sure that I can remain on this airplane for the rest of my career. I have a little over 5 years remaining. I'm thinking it's very likely I'm going to have to move to another airplane. And so I'm going to move to at Acme, we have a big category of 757, 767 domestic. And then it also is part of the international category, 767 international. And that might be the place that I go. I'll fly maybe mostly domestic trips, but I'll have the opportunity to fly to Sao Paulo, or the opportunity to fly to London, or, you know, one of the European destinations every once in a while. If I want. If I don't want to, then, you know, I won't. So that's my plan. But I'd love to. I've heard so many great things about 757 and 767, especially the 757, that I think it'd be kind of fun to fly that airplane as my last hurrah before I'm retired from the airlines. That's my plan.
Sounds good. And talking about the Airline Pilot Guy, the podcast, the famous podcast, it's great. When did you start to think, well, let's start an aviation podcast?
Well, I don't know if you know this or not, but when I started out, when I got involved in podcasting, it was right around the time that I had made a conversion to Catholicism. I grew up as a Lutheran. I was Protestant, and I started listening to podcasts, and I started really getting involved with a big, well, not a big at the time, it was a very small network of Catholic podcasting. And I was kind of behind the scenes. I wasn't doing any in front of the microphone or camera kind of work. But I was fascinated by this whole idea of podcasting. And after a couple of years, I thought, you know, what could be so hard about getting in front of a microphone and talking about something? And Robert, as you probably know, it's not as easy as you'd think. You know, being a pilot, you know, we talk on the microphone, right? We talk to air traffic control, we make PAs to the passengers, but having a microphone in front of you and doing a podcast or a video podcast as you do is not easy, unless, well, maybe it's easy for some people, but it's not as easy as you'd think it'd be. And anyway, regardless of that, I thought I'm going to start. I want to do my own podcast. And so I thought, what am I going to talk about? I'm part of this Catholic podcasting network, and the only thing I know anything about is flying airplanes, because that's what I do for a living. That's the only thing I have credibility to talk about. And, you know, not a great amount of credibility, but I have some. So I basically started a podcast called Catholic Pilot. And again, you know, Catholic Pilot, kind of tying in my faith and flying together. And everybody at the network thought, oh, that's a great idea. And at the same time, I also started another show. I was host of a panel talk show called Catholic Weekend, where we get together every week, and it was an hour-long show, and we'd talk about just stuff going on with our own lives and stuff in the news and that kind of thing. And so that kind of introduced me to this concept of having a show with a panel of co-hosts. And I was doing those things simultaneously. But what I realized pretty quickly was the people listening to my Catholic Pilot show didn't really care that much about the Catholic part. They were all interested in my job, flying airplanes and the layovers and all the related things to that. And I'm thinking to myself, you know, I might be limiting my audience because people will see this aviation podcast, but it's Catholic Pilot, and they're thinking they don't want to listen to somebody talk about their faith, you know, and I don't blame them. So I thought maybe I should rebrand it. And so I decided to make it a completely secular show, and I came up with the idea Airline Pilot Guy, and it just took off. And so that was about a year and a half after I had started podcasting back in September of 2009. So in May of 2011 is when I rebranded the show and made it Airline Pilot Guy, or as you've referred to it many times, and most people do now, APG, just the initials. And it's just taken off from that point in 2011 when I rebranded it. And I was doing it as a solo show for many years until about 2015, when I ended up adding a couple of co-hosts, Miami Rick and Dr. Steph.
Okay, great. And do you know how many listeners do you have today?
You know, as you probably know, I'm not sure if you have stats that you have access to and how many downloads and that kind of thing. That whole metric is kind of a weird science, and the podcasting world is still trying to get a grasp of how to gauge how many people are watching and listening. Now YouTube, you know, we're on YouTube right now, and they have very good analytical tools, and they can tell exactly how many people are listening, how many people started listening, how long they were listening to your show, at what point did they leave, you know, and that kind of thing. Where audio, the show that I do is primarily an audio podcast, and it doesn't have the sophistication as far as analytical tools to determine that. And so if somebody just hits the play button, that counts as a download on some algorithms. And the whole thing is getting, you know, people are trying to refine it and make it something that is solid, trustworthy, something that you can show to a potential advertiser and say, hey, look, I have 10,000 people that download this thing every episode, or 15,000. And there was a certain point where I was getting, there were some shows where it was over 40,000, 50,000, 60,000 downloads. And I'm thinking, wow, I don't know, really understand how this is happening. Now, about the same time, I'd started putting the show on Stitcher, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, all these different platforms. And I didn't know if that had something to do with it or what was going on. And then I learned that somebody who is doing a long format show, as I do, as we do, is a 3-hour show, the algorithm was sometimes counting a download twice or three times. So basically, everything was all out of whack for people like me that were doing long format shows. So I really had no idea how many people were listening. But I can tell you that I knew it was, way more people than I'd ever imagine would want to listen to me talk about aviation, or my co-hosts and I talk about it. But and honestly, I really don't care how many people listen to the show, because I don't have advertisers that are saying how many. They usually have a metric where they'll give you a certain amount of money per 1,000 downloads. I think it's called CPM. And so if you can prove to them that you have 15 to 20,000 people downloading your show every week, then they'll pay you 25 or 30 or $50 per 1,000 downloads. And it's can be a significant thing, and it's an important thing for people that have advertisers. Again, we don't. We have our listeners donate or contribute to our efforts, and I've done that the coffee fund.
Coffee fund.
Yes.
I was singing that music to 1 hour before this interview.
Yeah.
I love coffee. I love tea.
I love the APG community.
Yeah, that's great. And what about the next step for the APG? Do you have a project?
No, the funny thing is, Robert, this whole thing really was a way for me to play. I love technology. I love gadgets. I love, having this computer and the camera and the microphone and the mixers and all this audio technology. And really, that's what I wanted to do. I wanted to play with this stuff. And I had to have something to talk about. This is not the way you should do a show. You should have a passion about something that you want to just tell the world about, and then you figure out about all this stuff. But it was like, no, I want to play with these things. What am I going to talk about? And that's how this whole thing started. And of course, it's much more than that now to me. It's more than just playing with these electronic toys. It's getting together with my friends every week and getting together with my APG community and going out there on trips. And every year we do at least one big meetup somewhere. We've been to Farnborough International Air Show a couple times now. Last year we were in Pittsburgh at the Wings Over Pittsburgh Military Air Show, I said a military air show. It was sponsored by and put together by the Military Reserve Wing, but it was not a strictly military show. But anyway, it's getting out there, and all the people that listen to the show, they want to, be with you and your co-hosts and other people who share this love and passion of aviation, and to get together. And it's indescribable how awesome it is to get together with these people. And that's really what it's about for me now. It's not so much playing with the stuff. These toys are old now. I don't want to really play with them anymore, but I know that it's my way of communicating with the community. And now the show is...
We have just a small problem with our transmission.
Okay.
Unfortunately, we have a problem with our... Okay, now I'm hearing you very fine. You can continue, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm having to use my telephone as a hotspot because the Wi-Fi here in this hotel is crap, and I couldn't even open up anything with the broadband that they had here. But so sorry about that.
Yeah. Yeah, no, okay, it's a pity. Well, thank you very much, Captain Jeff. I had a great time here, and I hope to have you here in south of Brazil to eat a good barbecue or drink a good beer. And you can take a flight from Atlanta to Sao Paulo, and just 1 hour and 20 minutes flight to south of Brazil will be a great opportunity to talk a lot of things about aviation.
Absolutely. I'd love to do that. Thank you for the invitation, Robert.
Thank you very much. And have a great day, and have a nice trip tomorrow.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I have 3 more days to go, and I'm looking forward to it.
Bye bye.